Okay, well, we'll have to wing it. At this point, I'd like to welcome Carl from West Covina as your bearer speaker tonight. Thank you.
Jesus. All right. My name's Carl. I'm an alcoholic. And he said West Covina. I'm from Covina. That'd be like saying if you really are from Ventura and they say you're from, well, Oxnard. Right? I know that West Covina sounds like Covina, but it's not. Some people say, well, I've heard of West Covina, so where is Covina? I go, well, just a little east of there. West Covina got started like an AA meeting. Some businessmen got angry at Covina, stole a coffee pot, and went and started their own thing. That's exactly what happened. That's exactly what happened. Anyway, thank you, Scott, for asking me to come up here. And it's always good to see other friends. I've been making this drive for decades. I used to have this sponsor named Eddie Cochran who sponsored a guy named Mike Marina up here. And Mike sponsored half of Ventura County. So I had a whole bunch of sobriety brothers that kept on calling me saying, Carl, will you come up to, and it's like, okay, 2 hours, LA traffic. And, but what I felt today in driving up after decades of doing this was a profound sense of gratitude. And I sort of just remembered different stages of my life in sobriety as I made this drive. And I don't know, I'm just really grateful today. And I loved your new people. Edward, awesome, dude. Just cheers. And Corey, the new guy with the Raiders, he's got a new friend, it seems like. I don't know if you guys noticed that. Anyways, good to be here. Most important thing that I can tell you about myself is that I'm an alcoholic. There's a lot of things that I really, really care about in this world. There's things that I have passion for, that I spend a lot of time paying attention to, but there's nothing more important than the fact that I'm an alcoholic. And the reason I believe I'm an alcoholic is because I've got a really strange relationship with alcohol. That's why I'm an alcoholic. And this strange relationship that I have with alcohol takes on a few forms. The first part of this strange relationship that I have with alcohol happens when I drink it. Very strange thing happens when I drink booze. Our book calls it an allergic reaction. And the book says the symptom of this allergic reaction that I get when I drink alcohol is what they refer to as something called the phenomenon of craving. And the best way that I can describe this thing, that the book calls a phenomenon of craving in my life, is that it seems like whenever I drink booze, the more booze I drink, the thirstier I get. It's really strange. It happens with absolutely nothing else that I drink. You know, an example of that, they put 2 bottles of water, but I'm probably only going to deal with this one. And over the next 45 minutes to 6 hours that I'm talking with you, I'll probably drink half this bottle, and I'll probably take the rest with me. And before I get back to Covina, I will probably finish this bottle of water. But I can absolutely guarantee you that once I finish this bottle of water, I am not going to go get a case of water and lock myself in a motel room in El Monte. It's not going to happen. There's no way that I'm going to be texting Billy, dude, man, I need another case, man, I need another case. I'll turn the pink slip in my car over, come on, right? It's not going to happen. But if that was the only thing that made me alcoholic, this bizarre, unquenchable thirst that happens once I start to drink, if that was the sum total of my relationship with alcohol, well then, Just Say No would have wiped out alcoholism, right? Early 80s, Nancy Reagan came out and said, just say no. If that would have worked, you would have, and I imagine I would have gone, oh, no. And we would have just gone on and lived a happy, successful life just saying no. But I've got this other strange component of my relationship with alcohol. And what's really strange about this part of my relationship with alcohol is that this happens when I'm not drinking. For the people that are new or fairly new in Alcoholics Anonymous, I'm going to reiterate that this deadly component of my relationship with alcohol is activated when I'm not drinking. The book calls it the mental obsession. They also call it the strange mental blank spot, and they even drive it further home when they call it the thought process that precedes the first drink. And the best way that I can describe this thing that the book calls the mental obsession in my life is that it seems like no matter how much pain and suffering my last drunk caused, I seem to have a mind that will always paint a picture that makes it okay for me to take another drink. I seem to have this mind that will rationalize and justify my walk back to the next drink at all costs. So therefore, because of these two components of my relationship with alcohol, number one, I cannot drink successfully because of this unquenchable thirst, this craving that happens, this loss of control. So I can't drink successfully. But at the very same time, because of this thing called the mental obsession, I cannot not drink successfully. I'm damned if I do, and I'm damned if I don't. It's the ultimate catch-22 we call alcoholism. I swear to you, if I could do either one of those two things, either drink successfully or on my own not drink successfully, that's what I'd be doing. Well, I just lied. And Scott, in a lot of his text messages this week, were saying, have a good time, but try not to lie. And I am 6 minutes into this, and I just lied to you. I just told you that I would drink successfully if I could. When I was fairly new, I used to think, I knew alcohol had kicked my rear. I was in so much trouble, we'll get to that, that I knew, I know I can't drink, and if you would have asked me, oh, I know I can't, but if I could, I would love to drink successfully. But I didn't know what successful drinking actually was. And the reason I did not know what successful drinking actually was is because I had never done it. But now at 38 years of sobriety, I have witnessed it in a number of other people, and I've read about it. And I'm here to report to you what I found out, and let's see if it interests you. Apparently, successful drinking entails drinking approximately 2 drinks. And stopping. 2 drinks and stop. I would rather all of you right now stand up and scream obscenities at me for the next hour and then leave me here standing alone at the podium. I would rather that happen than for me to be caught in a situation where I have 2 drinks in me and I can't get any more. That is a nightmare scenario for me. I'm going to harp on that physical feature just a little bit more because it's the one thing, bar none, we all have in common. Because actually, if you're new in Alcoholics Anonymous, I'll admit, there's a lot of things we don't have in common, really. And why is that? That's because Alcoholics Anonymous is a huge, wide cross-section of society. Every single race, creed, color, religion, every single social and economic background, every single culture, we're all here. We come from all types of different families. We were raised in different areas. We're all different ages. I mean, we are such a cross-section of society that right here in this room, we probably have a bank president, a bank teller, and a bank robber, all right here, right now in this room. So our stories are very different based upon, our background, where we come from. But on top of that, our stories are different because we drink differently than each other. We really do. If you listen closely, when people tell their stories in meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous, I think you'll agree, we drink differently than each other. And to illustrate that, let's imagine this. Let's imagine right through these back doors, we wheel in a giant cart, bring it right up here, and on that cart we got all the kinds of booze we all love. If you're some sort of expensive top shelf drinker, okay, we'll accommodate you. We got some Cavassier, some Remy Martin, fine, we got it. If you're a bottom shelf drinker, we got that too, Mad Dog 2020. I knew I liked Ventura. Right? And everything in between. We got it on the cart. And all of us come and take a good 4 or 5 stiff drinks, real drinks. No umbrellas in there, no mixer. A good 4 or 5 stiff drinks, the kind that make you go, oh, right? And you get it down. 4 or 5 of them. We would all be acting very differently. Right? Over in this corner, we'd have the good time crowd. Fun, 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 woohoo, drink, 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 talk, 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 drink, 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 talk, 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 party, 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 drink, 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 talk, 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 add a little methamphetamine, talk a little faster, talk, 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 talk. But we're having a good time in that corner. Over in that corner, we'd have the criers. You know them, they get a little drunk, like, oh! Over in that corner, we'd have the fighters. You know them, get drunk, gotta fight, fight, fight. And over in this corner, a bunch of us would be naked. I personally would be visiting the other 3 corners, trying to find a couple of friends to come over here with me. just the way that I get, that's all. So our stories are very different based upon which corner we drink in, right? If you're in the good time corner, we get arrested a lot. We're out on the road, got to get to the next bar. It's always happening in the next bar, isn't it? You know, after hours, whose house are we going to? Oh, we're going over to Bruce's house. Come on, let's go, right? We're on the road. We get arrested. Over in the crying corner, they don't get arrested. They don't even leave the damn house. The worst thing they do, they call you at 3 a.m. from their closet. Blah, 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 blah. So our stories are very different based upon which corner we're drinking in. But there's one thing, no matter which corner we're in, there's one thing we would all be doing. We would all be back at that cart for another drink. It was really important for me to understand that when I was new in Alcoholics Anonymous, when they said listen for the similarities rather than the differences. Because if I'm listening to what kind of family you came from, how old you are, what culture you come from, what's your education level, what did you do, any of that. If I'm listening to any of that, I don't know, interesting, but I may or may not identify. It's a 1 in 50 shot. But if I listen instead to, no matter what the other stuff is, what happens to you when you drink? And almost, more importantly, what happens to you when on your own you try to not drink? If I listen to that, I can identify with anybody in Alcoholics Anonymous. So I set this relationship up with alcohol that I just described to you right from the get-go when I first started drinking, and I started drinking very late compared to most people in AA. I was 11. I hung in there for a while. I was born in Helena, Montana. At 4 years old, my father packed the whole family up and we moved to the island of Borneo in Southeast Asia. That's where I was until I was almost 10 years old. Came back and the family moved to Seattle, and I was almost 10, and within the next year and a half, I took my first drink. And it wasn't because I was trying to escape from anything. It wasn't because, I was in an alcoholic family. It's just because my new best friend up the street, Dave, his dad was having this big, giant block party, and he goes, my dad bought a case of whiskey and a case of vodka. We could steal a bottle and we could try it. What do you think? I go, this sounds like a great idea. And that night, my life changed. Instantaneously, that relationship to alcohol that I just described to you happened. And my life completely changed from that point. By the time I was 14, my vocabulary was, whoa, wow, hey, right? And my parents were like, what happened to our son? Oh my God, he used to love school, he loved the family, he played music, he played sports, and now he's just like, whoa, right? And they always blame my problems on people, place, and things. Get him away from that group of kids he's hanging out with. Things get better. Get him out of the damn public school system. Get him into the private school system. They tried all of the above, but you see, I'm an alcoholic. My problems are not based upon people, place, and things. My problems are based upon my physical and mental relationship to alcohol. You see, if you change the people, place, and things in somebody's life like mine, all that happens is that I'm drunk with other people in different places, ruining different things. That's all that happens. By the time I was 18, I barely scraped out of the public school system there in Seattle after getting kicked out of the private school system, and my parents decided that Seattle was the problem. Get them out of Seattle, things get better. They sent me 300 miles away to Washington State University. I spent 3 years at that university on my parents' money, and in that 3 years, I got almost 10 credits. At any given time, my grade point average matched my blood alcohol content, about a 0.25. I did nothing at that school. By the time I was 22, this little story I'm about to tell you will let you know exactly where I stood with my family. Now, my father was Swedish, my mother was Icelandic. That's why I kind of looked like a polar bear, I guess. I don't know, whatever this is. And I don't know whether this custom I'm about to tell you about is a Scandinavian custom or whether it's a Lutheran custom. I don't know, but at Christmas time, my parents wouldn't just send out Christmas cards to their friends and relatives. My parents would send out this big, long Christmas letter that said everything the family had been doing that year. And when I was about 22, I got a hold of one of these letters that had been sent out the previous Christmas, and as I read it, it let me know exactly where I stood with the family. Now, the first paragraph talked about what my parents had been doing that year. Another impressive year, I'm sure. They were impressive people, impressive lives. There's a whole department named after my mother at the University of Washington. There's about 9 churches, 2 hospitals, and a seminary that are standing around the world because of the work my father did. So I'm sure that paragraph was quite impressive. The next paragraph talked about what the Morris children had been doing that year, and that paragraph went something like this. Our oldest daughter, Christina, just graduated from Cornell University in Ithaca, New York, with a master's degree in human resources. She's now working for a large pharmaceutical company in the Midwest. She traveled to Europe this summer. She saw this, she saw that. her hobbies are this, and this. She's a very happy young woman. We are very proud of her. Our oldest son, Eric, just graduated from Western Washington State University with a degree in marketing. He's now working for a large advertising firm here in downtown Seattle. He loves the golf. He loves to travel. He's engaged to be married to this wonderful woman named Mary Lou, who works for a very small company here in Seattle named Microsoft. It was small at one time, and they love to golf together. They love to travel together. He's a very happy young man. We're very proud of him. Our youngest son, Carl, just turned 22. It's kind of like... Long story short, what happened over the next 18 months, between 22 and 23 and a half, it literally would take till tomorrow morning to describe everything that was involved in that 18 months that led up to what I'm about to say. So I just condensed 18 months into one sentence. A really bad night happened, so I joined the Navy. It was a bad night. What I'm about to tell you should concern you if you have any, if you care anything about the security of the United States. What I'm about to tell you should concern you, but on my way into the Navy, I passed a potential test. It's called the ASVAB test. And this test that I took qualified me to become a nuclear engineer. That should concern you, that the United States Navy would have any type of system in place that even maybe, possibly, or even remotely would allow somebody like me near anything nuclear. However, they made me take another test when I showed up at that base for boot camp, and I could not pass that particular test. That test is called a urinalysis test, is what it's called. I never knew how to study for those things. Should have been kicked out of the Navy. Series of events allowed me to stay in. They took away the 2-year nuclear school they were going to send me to, and they sent me directly out to the fleet. Now I'm out in the middle of the Pacific Ocean on a Spruance-class destroyer, and we're out at sea for 2 and 3 weeks at a time. And when the ship was out at sea, I was not drinking. At this point in my life, I'm 23, I'm 24, I'm 25 years old. And at this point in my life, when the ship was out at sea, I did well. I wasn't drinking. I'd be out for 2 or 3 weeks, and I actually responded well to the military, and I started to understand what it meant to serve my country. I started to understand the camaraderie of being in the military. By God, I was learning a trade that probably could have held me till now if I would have used it. But the ship would always pull into port sooner or later. And I would leave that ship and I would take a drink. And at this point in my life, when I take a drink, I was triggering off a minimum of 2 days, sometimes a 3-day, every once in a while, a 4-day drunk. And when I'm on a 4-day drunk, but the ship is only in port for 2 days, we've got a little math problem going on. And it's a very strange feeling coming out of one of these 3 and 4-day drunks and finding myself on a large pier in a foreign country at 6 a.m. going, there was a destroyer here the other day. Navy gets pretty angry at this behavior. I'd been in the Navy approximately 2 years at this point, and I came to in a cheap hotel room in downtown San Diego, and as my eyes opened up, I realized, oh, not again. No, it's Monday, and I started drinking on Thursday. No, not again. And I grabbed my stuff, and I got in my car and started racing back to try to get back to the base where the ship is. And one of the tools for living I had at this point is I would always keep a pint underneath my seat for the end of the drunk, because I always knew when I got back to the ship it's going to be a while till I get a drink, so I'd always have this pint, and I'm trying to get that pint in me. I'm trying to get back to the base. I'm driving fast. My car is dying of alcoholism right along with me. You know the type. And I lost control of the car right outside the base, right in front of the guard shack, where a Marine stands duty. And I remember the Marine at the guard shack, like, all of it had his head like, and I tried to swerve. The car hit this cement median on the right-hand side and flipped over and bang, right through that guard shack. And I am so very grateful the United States Marines are in tip-top physical shape, because this young man did a quick somersault. He was back up, weapon drawn. I really hated mornings like this. God, I hated mornings like this. I mean, sirens going off, everybody screaming and yelling and running in different directions. They're all pointing at me like this is my fault. And I'm climbing out of the car, and I feel like I got questions as to what happened also. It's like, whoa. I really hated mornings like that. And stage 2 of mornings that I hated, about an hour later, I find myself in a hospital bed, and I'm handcuffed to the hospital bed. I really, hated warnings like that. That particular morning, my Navy superiors are, of course, reading new charges on me, and this is nothing significant in my life. That's just what happens in a guy's life like mine about every 90 days if you're living like I'm living. New charges, that's just what happens. But the most significant thing that happened that morning is the Navy doctors prescribed this stuff called Antabuse for me. I always love the knowing groan, oh, Antabuse, right? And I was now under orders to show up at sick bay every single morning before quarters. I'd have to sit in a chair, I'd have to put my hands at my side, I'd have to stick my tongue out, and the hospital corpsman would put this little white pill on my tongue and make me sit there for half an hour to make sure the Antabuse actually got in my system. Over the next 7 to 10 days, I started to experience the most cunning, baffling, and powerful side of this thing we call alcoholism, and that is I had no alcohol in my system, but I'm slowly going insane. See, I used to be able to not drink for those 2 or 3 weeks when the ship's out at sea because I always knew there was a drink on the horizon. But now they've salted my tail with this Antabuse stuff and given me a very stern warning about drinking on top of it, and they have seriously taken alcohol away from me. This is not the first time in my life that people who loved me, cared about me, or who had authority over me, it's not the first time that they have taken alcohol away from me. But the normal scenario when they take alcohol away from me is they would always take alcohol away from me, then they put me in front of well-meaning, highly educated people for a one-on-one appointment. I'd be in some sort of an appointment with a therapist, psychiatrist, psychologist, maybe a pastor. At this point in my Navy career, I've got a weekly appointment with a Navy psychiatrist and a weekly appointment with a Navy chaplain. And these well-meaning people would always have this report in front of them, and they'd be looking at it, they'd look at me, they'd look at this, they'd look at me, and they would say something similar. Each one would have their own version of saying, "What's the matter with you? Why do you do this?" And if I would have had the vocabulary that you guys have given me here in Alcoholics Anonymous over the last 38 years, I would have responded to these well-meaning people who were honestly just trying to help me. I would have said something like this. I would have said, "I see that you're shocked by my drinking. Honestly, I am too sometimes." But I would have followed it up with, "But if you knew how I felt when I wasn't drinking, you wouldn't be asking me why I drink. There's only one thing worse than the price I'm paying for my drinking, and that's the way that I feel when I'm not drinking." And I didn't understand in that feeling that I could not verbalize, I was actually defining my own alcoholism. Lasted about 10 days on that Antabuse. I went AWOL from my ship, and I locked myself back in that hotel room in downtown San Diego, Plaza Hotel, 4th and Broadway. May of 1986, the Plaza cost $13 a night. I checked right before COVID, it was $19 a night. Maybe now with recent inflation, it might be at $23 a night, I don't know. But I locked myself in the hotel room, and I remember sitting on the edge of the bed, and on this rickety little end table, I had a bottle of vodka and a shot glass, and as I stared at the bottle of vodka, I remembered that the Navy doctors had given me a very stern warning about drinking on top of Antabuse. When they prescribed it for me, they had told me, "Son, you need to understand that if you drink on top of this Antabuse, you're going to get one of 2 reactions. One reaction is you will get violently ill. The other reaction is you might die." I remember sitting in that hotel room looking at the bottle, and I thought, well, I wonder which reaction I'm going to get. And I took one shot, and nothing happened. Authority had lied to me again as far as I was concerned. I waited about 2 minutes just to make sure, and I took another shot. All of a sudden, I felt tingly in the face, so I looked in this cracked little mirror that was in this hotel room, and I was like bright red, blotchy and purple in places. Took another shot. All of a sudden, I could feel my heart going boom, boom, boom. Looked at my shirt, I was drenched in sweat, and then all of a sudden, it's like hyperventilating. We're doing all right so far. So I took another shot, and up it came. My second sponsor, the one I mentioned earlier, Eddie Cochran, whose sobriety date was December 2nd, 1951, literally one of the pioneers of Southern California Alcoholics Anonymous. He called the next thing that happened to me projectile regurgitation. This is a new level of puking I am unfamiliar with, right? Literally, it was like Linda Blair spray across her, right? Thank God the Plaza Hotel is the type of hotel room where the toilet is in the same room with the bed. Might be a design feature, I believe, maybe to make convicts feel more at home upon release. I'm not really sure. But I found the magic of drinking on top of Antabuse, and that is if you hang in there. It's a very important feature if you're going to drink on top of Antabuse, because if you're going to drink on Antabuse, you cannot half measure it. In fact, if you're going to drink on top of Antabuse, you might need to reach down deep inside yourself for a level of commitment you might not even know you have. But I found that if I kept drinking and kept puking and kept drinking and kept puking for about an hour to an hour and a half, enough of the Antabuse would kick out of my system and I'd quit throwing up and I would just be left with red face, hyperventilating and sweating, and I'm all right with that. So I drank on top of Antabuse the last 7 months of my drinking. The only words to describe this are desperation drinking. My second to my last drunk, I was left for dead in a pool of blood in a motel parking lot in National City. I came to on an operating table. You know how when you come to, you look at your surroundings, and we're really trying to figure out, was it a good night or a bad night? That's really what we're trying to figure out. But when you come to and there's men and women with surgical tools in their hands, you kind of go, oh, that was a bad night. Oh. Last night of drinking, I'm being let out of the San Diego jail. I'm being transferred from the civilian authorities back to the military authorities. The handcuffs are extra tight. My neck muscles are not working well. I'm being led into this office and this vehicle and then into this office and then into this. And finally, the civilian authorities release me back to the military authorities. The military MPs are trying to bring me back to my ship. I'm still in handcuffs, and they come up to the quarterdeck of the ship, and the officer deck put his arm up and said, wrong answer. Orders have already been processed on this loser last night, and the orders are 90 days in the brig, bad conduct discharge, and then he got this sort of unpleasant look on his face. He said, or these orders here say he can go to treatment. And when they said treatment, I went, Now, it wasn't because I thought treatment was a good idea. I didn't even know what it was. I'd heard of it, but this is how I would have heard of treatment or anything. I could be in a bar or a crack house, and somebody say, anybody seen Joe lately? And somebody say, yeah, Joe got arrested. He went to treatment. We'd all go, oh. That was it. Nobody did follow-up questions. Nobody decided, let's get a hold of Joe, see how he's doing. It was just, oh. But that morning, the reason I responded to it is because that treatment thing sounded like it might help me with the inevitable appointment I have with the court soon. See, I was 25 years old. I'm not doing well at life, as you can tell. But I did know this. Whenever I was in handcuffs, I was going to have an appointment with a judge fairly soon. Now, I now know it wouldn't have mattered what I was thinking or feeling or what my choice would have been that morning because I was in handcuffs. And I don't know about your experience in handcuffs, but my experience was always the same. Whoever had me in handcuffs, never once did they ever say, so what's your opinion on what we're going to do next? Right? When you're in handcuffs, you go where they say. And they took me up to a military treatment center, and when the doors were locked behind me, that's when they took the handcuffs off me. That's how I arrived to you guys. And how I arrived to you guys back in the late 80s, early 90s, United States Navy, the people that they had in their treatment centers, they would take us out to meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous. We'd been in this place 7 days, and all of a sudden they started shouting, 6 p.m., parking lot. And all of us are out there in the parking lot. About 7 white vans pull up. About 6 or 7 of us would put into each one of these vans, and each van took off out in town. And we would come to meetings like this. They would always choose meetings about this size. So if this meeting was down in San Diego, late 80s, early 90s, there would always be a line up of military men and women that were in the treatment center. And our van was always had the ones that had serious charges on them, so they always had an armed guard with us. And it's back when you could still smoke in meetings, so if our van was here at your meeting, the fellow back there in the white, he would have been like our armed guard standing at the door, and he would be probably there smoking, and he'd always have his jacket back so you could see his weapon, which made us stay in our seat. It was sort of a strong sponsorship idea, I guess. It was respect the meeting, stay in your seat. But I got to tell you, once again, my impression was, okay, once again, alcohol has been taken away from me. But the difference this time was instead of being put in front in a one-on-one appointment with some highly educated person that wants to help me, but they always wanted to talk to me about me. That's what they were always engaging me with. Tell us, what's going on with you? Now alcohol has been taken away from me, and instead of that situation, I'm put in front of you guys. And you guys do not want to talk to me about me at all. You guys seem to just want to talk about yourselves. That's what you would do. You would go on and on and on about yourselves, like I'm doing right now. Right? When Scott called me or sent me a text, hey, Carl, you want to drive for an hour and 45 minutes to come up to Ventura and talk about yourself for 45 minutes? Like, yes, I do. We seem to love to talk about ourselves. If you are new or fairly new or not so new, and this gets you really, really nervous, I still get nervous doing this. I've been doing it for decades, but I still get nervous. I understand. The reason you get nervous is because we judge you. We really do. There's no secret. You guys are going to be talking about me later, and I didn't like that. I know. But here's how you get over that nervousness. Go practice telling your story in the mental institution. They won't judge you. They won't. And while you're telling your story in the mental institution, at a certain point in your story, if a guy on the couch goes, that was great, save that part of your story. Because if they like it in the mental institution, we're going to love it here in Alcoholics Anonymous. If you're new, it's called Hospitals and Institutions. It's one of the most valuable things you can do when you are new or not so new in Alcoholics Anonymous. After 45 days, I was let out of that military treatment center. And, it was read in chapter 5 how it works when they said we stood at the turning point. And I got to tell you, I've stood at the turning point in my 38 years of sobriety many, many times under many, many situations. And what I mean by stood at the turning point, in numerous times in life, we all reach this point, and we never know it at the time, but in hindsight we go, ooh, if I would have turned right, my life would have gone that way. If I would have turned left, my life went that way. And we look at which way we turn, we know my life went that way. And I got to tell you, the first time I faced that was leaving that military treatment center. They brought my car out of this impound lot because I'd been arrested in my vehicle the night before they threw me to that treatment center. A bunch of cars were brought to the impound lot. And I was leaving that military treatment center, which was at the Miramar Naval Air Station. That's where that was. That's where the Top Gun pilot school was. Our little section was called Top Drunk, is what they called us. But I was leaving there, and if you know where that's at, it's right near where the 15 and 163 meet. And I was leaving that base, and literally I was thinking, I had orders in my hand, in my car, and my orders said it was Friday afternoon. I don't need to be back to my ship till Monday. Think about that. What Navy clerk would do that? Let's send him to treatment at the taxpayer's dollar for 45 days and then give him the weekend off. But I got to tell you, I remember leaving that base and I thought, okay, if I turn right and head down the 163, I can drop right back downtown and just pick up right where I left off at the Plaza Hotel. It's sitting there for me. But by this time, I'd been to a lot of meetings. And there was another voice that came up. It wasn't quite as strong as the turn right, head downtown. But it was there. And this voice says, but Carl, if you turn left, there was that meeting hall where they took you a few times. And when you were there at the meetings, people talked about being at that same building earlier in the day for a morning meeting. Or they were talking about going to the other meeting the next night. And Carl, you remember where that building is because it's just a couple of blocks from a bar you used to drink at. If you turn left there, maybe you'll be safe. And that's what I did. I turned left. And I went to the North Shore Alano Club in Pacific Beach. And I show up at this 6 o'clock gong show meeting, and the one guy that night, there was many guys I'm sure operating on their primary purpose, a meeting about this size, bustling, fun meeting just like yours. A lot of energy in it, right? And before the meeting, I'm sitting in the back, and one guy came barreling across the meeting and said, hey, never seen you here before. What are you doing? Like rather aggressive. And he startled me, and I accidentally told him the truth. I said, I don't know what I'm doing. I just got out of a Navy treatment center about an hour ago. I don't know. This guy's eyes went bing, big smile went across his face. He looked like he had just hit the jackpot in Las Vegas. See, I didn't know I just established myself as the holy grail of Alcoholics Anonymous. A new guy who accidentally admits he does not know what he's doing. Right? So at the break of the meeting, he's fighting his friends. Leave him alone. He's mine. I got him. I got this guy. Now, there was something else going on in this guy's life that particular Friday night that made him especially glad to meet me. This guy's girlfriend had left him the night before for one of his friends in his home group. I know. So he was wondering what he was going to do with his weekend. Homicide, suicide, get drunk or grab this newcomer. He's like all over me all weekend. We went to like 18 meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous. And in between the meetings, he'd throw me in the passenger side of his car, he'd start driving, and he'd start yelling. He wouldn't even look at the road. He had like one of these AA radar cars that just made it to the next meeting, I guess. And he'd be yelling, you got to go to meetings, you got to read the book, you got to get a sponsor. Damn her! Got to go to meetings, got to read the book. Damn her! He's like, Jesus. See, I didn't know it, but I was getting a very early introduction to your typical AA relationship breakup is what I was getting. But I'm so glad that that guy, that night, in his pain, was a guy in Alcoholics Anonymous who had actually done the work of Alcoholics Anonymous, who had taken the steps of Alcoholics Anonymous, and therefore he understood that the solution to his pain that weekend was out of self, out of self, out of self. After that weekend, I got back to my ship, and the one other sober member of Alcoholics Anonymous was waiting for me. His name was Bob W. He was 23 years old. He had 14 months of sobriety, and he just pounced on me. He heard that I was coming out of the same treatment center that he'd been to 14 months before, and he just was, and you know, his name was Bob W., and he was very proud of his name. He would say things like, I'm like the hybrid of the founders of Alcoholics Anonymous. If there was such a thing as a rolling eye emoji back then, I would have done it. Oh my God. My first 2 years of sobriety was spent on that same ship with Bob as we traveled the world, and whenever the ship pulled into port, we would go find you guys. Every time ship would pull into port, first thing, Bob and I would find a payphone. We'd use whatever currency we had. We would dial a number. Maybe a live person would answer, maybe just a recording. They'd give us an address. We would hunt you guys down using a map, a real map. But we'd still be out at sea for 2 and 3 weeks at a time. So Bob had a sponsor back in port that told him he needed to set up an appointment with me every single night when the ship was out at sea and read the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous back and forth to each other. And so we would meet every single night at 6:30 when the ship was out at sea down in this little battery shop down at the bottom of engine room number 2. And in my mind's eye, when I picture those 2 young men out in the middle of the Pacific Ocean down in the bottom of engine room number 2 of the USS Cushing, in this little battery shop, 2 guys reading the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, neither one of us knew what we were doing. He had 14 months. I'm the first guy he really worked with. I certainly didn't know what I was doing. But I view it as Alcoholics Anonymous in its purest form, the blind leading the blind. We had 2 guys that had the willingness to stay sober. We had a big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. We had access to the fellowship when we had it. And what's supposed to happen under those conditions happened for both of us. We both had a drastic rearrangement of our attitudes and ideas about what life is. And that's what the big book promises us. You know how you guys got to celebrate the 2 birthdays, and happy birthday to both of you? It's wonderful to see that. But you guys sang pretty gosh darn well for AA. It was really quite impressive, in tune and everything, but all their friends celebrating. And you know, my 1 year happened in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. January 21st, 1988, I got 1 year, and we're out at sea, and Bob went and stole a stale piece of cornbread off the mess deck. We didn't have any candles on the ship, and so he got this wood match, and he flicked the wood match, put it on there, and he sang really bad. Happy birthday to you. Then I blew out the match, and then he said, would you like to share? It was so lame. It was just lame. But I got to tell you, later that night in my rack, as I laid in my rack, I had a spiritual experience. One of many that added up to the spiritual awakening that we are promised. Mine was multiple little incidences like this. That night, when I had 1 year, I laid in my rack, and see, at that point in my life, I still had a lot of stuff going on. I had so many charges. I'm trying to deal with civilian charges, military charges. I was walking on thin air with the military, but they were keeping me in as we went. And my family still wouldn't even barely talk to me, right? They were not sure that I was telling the truth. They were way still up in Seattle. They hadn't looked me in the eyes. They didn't quite know. Was I telling the truth? I had other things that I hadn't talked to my sponsor about yet that could land me into more legal trouble. I mean, I didn't even know what was real or not real or whether I was going to make it out of here. But I did know this. I had 1 year without a drink. That was the one thing that was concrete. And on that night, I learned why we guard our sobriety date with our life. Why it is that our sobriety date slips off our tongue as much as my children's birthdays, right? Because it's the profoundly important date. And I realized that night. And a lot of things started to make sense from that point. 2 years sober, I got an honorable discharge out of the Navy. That's the result of the steps of Alcoholics Anonymous, and apparently merciful God and a Navy clerk that lost half my file. Do I have like 5 minutes just about? Okay, I can sum everything up in this. I think this is less than a 5-minute story. Really, I can sum everything up with this. In 1998, I was asked to go to Nogales, Arizona, and do exactly what I'm doing tonight at some conference there. That's before we had cell phones, but we had pagers. Remember pagers? I called my mother and said, Mom, if you try to page me this weekend and I don't answer, I don't know whether my pager works in Nogales. I'm going to Nogales this weekend. She goes, oh, you need to get a hold of Don and Leona. They would love to hear from you. They're very close to Nogales. I'll go, who? They go, oh, yeah, you haven't seen them since you were like 9 or 10 years old. Don was the best man at your father's, my wedding, and oh, yes, of course, I remember. So I called up Don, and I said, Don, this is Carl Morris. I'm going to be in Nogales, it's south of you. Maybe we could get together for coffee or something. And he said, oh, I hear you love to golf. Bring your clubs, we'll go golfing. I'm like, that's weird. Haven't seen him since I was 9 or 10 years old, but it's true. I'm like a golf whore. I'll golf with anybody at any time for any reason. I don't even need to know your name, your politics. I will golf with you, right? But that was weird. But I brought my clubs, and I left the conference. And I went up to Nogales in Green Valley, 20 miles north, and met him at his golf club. And we started to walk along, and he started to ask me very specific questions about my life. But in the way he framed his questions, he already knew a lot. He knew what school I graduated from. He knew when I got out of the military, he knew what school I graduated from, what my degree was in, the company that I worked for with General Electric for years, and then this group of recovery houses that I was involved in. He just knew everything about my life. And by the 4th hole, I go, Don, I haven't seen you since I was 10 years old. I've tried to squeeze in a couple of questions as to what you retired from and why you moved down here, but you already seem to know everything about my life. How is that? He said, oh, that is just so easy, Carl. Every year, I get the Christmas letter. I'm like, oh my God, yes! If nothing else happened, that would have been enough. Thank you very much.
All right, let's give Carl another round of applause. Thank you. Oh.